A T-Rex opens its mouth. The music rises. The camera shakes. And suddenly, the whole prehistoric world seems to belong to teeth. That is the version we learned first. Dinosaurs became a story about hunters. Sharp claws, crushing bites, giant shadows moving through the trees. But look past the roar for 1 second. Most of the landscape was not being shaped by the hunter. It was being shaped by the animals everyone calls prey. The slow ones, the heavy ones, the ones chewing leaves while the movie monster gets the poster. Maybe the real main characters were not the killers. Maybe they were the herds. A predator can end one life. A giant herbivore can change an entire place. It can strip branches, open paths, crush young plants, move nutrients across the land, carry seeds farther than wind might carry them, turn forest edges into feeding grounds, turn riverbanks into trails, turn ordinary ground into a map of movement. That is the quiet reversal. The dinosaur age may not have been written only by jaws. It may have been written by footsteps. When we imagine dinosaurs, we often imagine a chase. A hungry carnivore appears. A terrified plant eater runs. The scene feels simple. One animal is active. The other is only escaping. One animal drives the drama. The other becomes background food. But ecosystems do not work like movie scenes. The loudest animal is not always the most important animal. The most frightening animal is not always the strongest ecological force. Predators matter. Of course they matter. They influence behavior. They test weakness. They remove sick or careless individuals. They can change where prey feels safe. But predators are usually fewer. They need large territories. They depend on bodies that already exist. A T-Rex could not build a world alone. It needed a world full of plant eaters first. That is the hidden order. Before the bite, there had to be grassless plains, forests, floodplains, conifers, ferns, cycads, leaves, trunks, and herds. Before the chase, there had to be an entire feeding machine. The herbivores were that machine. Not a machine made of metal. A machine made of stomachs, feet, teeth, dung, and daily hunger. Every day, plant-eating dinosaurs had to solve one problem. How do you turn a landscape into enough food? For a small animal, that problem is personal. For a giant animal, that problem becomes environmental. A massive sauropod did not just take a few bites. It entered a place and changed the pressure on that place. Branches disappeared. Leaves were removed. Saplings were broken. Soil was pressed down. Openings appeared where shade had been thick. Other animals could move through those openings. Sunlight could reach different plants. Insects, small reptiles, mammals, and other dinosaurs experienced a changed world. Not because a predator roared, because a herbivore ate breakfast. That sounds less dramatic, but it may be more powerful. Modern ecosystems already show this pattern. Elephants do not just live in a habitat, they reshape it. They knock down trees. They open paths. They spread seeds. They create water access. They make life easier for some species and harder for others. Large herbivores can decide whether a place becomes dense woodland, open ground, or something between. Now imagine that idea in the Mesozoic. Imagine herbivores even larger than elephants. Imagine herds with bodies heavier than trucks. Imagine their feeding repeated for generations. The effect would not be a single event. It would be a background force. Slow, ordinary, constant. That is the kind of force history often misses. A predator attack is easy to picture. An ecosystem being reshaped over thousands of years is harder. So we give the spotlight to the animal with teeth. But the landscape may remember the animal with weight. Think about a herd walking through soft ground. One footprint is a mark. 1,000 footprints become a route. A route becomes a repeated path. A repeated path changes how water moves. It changes where plants recover. It changes where smaller animals travel. It changes where future herds choose to go. The animal is not just moving through geography. It is editing geography. This is why the herbivore story matters. It is not just about who ate whom. It is about who made the stage. Carnivores performed on that stage. Herbivores may have helped build it. And that changes the way we see dinosaur power. Power is not always speed. Power is not always violence. Power can be appetite multiplied by numbers. One triceratops looks impressive. A herd of them is a landscape event. One hadrosaur is an animal. Thousands of hadrosaurs across a region become a moving pressure system. One sauropod is astonishing. Many sauropods over time become an ecological tool. They trim the world. They disturb it. They fertilize it. They carry pieces of one place into another. This is where the prey label becomes too small. Prey is a moment in a predator's day. Herbivore is a lifetime role in an ecosystem. An animal might be hunted for minutes, but it feeds, walks, digests, and changes habitat every day. That daily activity matters, maybe more than the rare dramatic attack. The predator gets remembered because danger is easy to feel. Our brains notice teeth. We notice claws. We notice the moment something might die. That is natural. Fear is a powerful storyteller. But nature is not organized by our fear. Nature is organized by energy. Plants capture sunlight. Herbivores turn plants into movement. Carnivores follow that movement. The food chain does not begin with the hunter. It begins with green life. Then it passes through the bodies eating that green life. That makes herbivores the main bridge. Without them, predators are only impressive designs with nothing to run after. A T-Rex without herbivores is not a king. It is a problem with no food. That is the quiet part. The throne depends on the herd. Even the most famous carnivore was living inside a system built by plant consumption. Its muscles were powered indirectly by leaves. Its territory was meaningful because prey moved through it. Its success depended on the abundance, health, and behavior of herbivores. So, when we call T-Rex the main character, we may be confusing drama with structure. Drama asks who makes us gasp. Structure asks who keeps the world functioning. Those are different questions. Carnivores win the first question. Herbivores may win the second. This does not make predators unimportant. It simply puts them back into scale. A predator can shape fear. A herbivore can shape habitat. A predator can change movement. A herbivore can change vegetation. A predator can leave bones. A herbivore can leave pathways, dung, bite marks, broken plants, and altered soils. Some of those traces vanish. Some fossilize. Many are only inferred. That makes the story harder to tell. A bite mark on bone feels direct. A changed forest structure is more subtle. A tooth wound is evidence with drama. A landscape pattern is evidence with patience. Paleontology often has to work with fragments. Bones, teeth, trackways, coprolites, sediment, plant fossils, and comparisons with living animals. No one filmed a sauropod clearing a woodland. No one watched a hadrosaur herd reshape a floodplain. So scientists have to build careful possibilities. Not wild certainty, careful possibilities. That is why this angle should be handled honestly. We should not replace one cartoon with another. The old cartoon says predators ruled everything. A new cartoon would say herbivores controlled everything. Reality is more interesting than both. Ecosystems are networks. Predators, herbivores, plants, climate, rivers, fire, soil, and seasons all interact. But the reverse angle is still valuable. It corrects our bias. It asks us to notice the animals we turned into background. It asks us to see plant eaters as active forces, not just victims waiting for a chase scene. Look at the bodies themselves. Many herbivorous dinosaurs were not simple walking buffets. They were specialized machines. Hadrosaurs had complex chewing systems. Ceratopsians had powerful beaks and shearing teeth. Sauropods had long necks that changed feeding reach. Ankylosaurs carried armor because survival was not passive. Stegosaurs had plates, spikes, bodies, and feeding strategies. Each group interacted with plants differently. Different mouths create different landscapes. A beak does not affect plants like a long neck. A grinding dental battery does not feed like a cropping jaw. A low browser pressures different vegetation than a high browser. A small herd affects ground differently from a giant herd. Herbivore diversity means ecological diversity. That is easy to forget. We say plant eater as if it describes one lifestyle. But eating plants can mean many things. It can mean stripping leaves, cropping low growth, breaking branches, swallowing seeds, digesting tough fibers, moving between feeding grounds, creating trails between water and food, choosing open spaces, avoiding risky edges, following seasonal resources, living in groups, nesting in colonies, feeding young, competing with other herbivores. Each behavior leaves pressure on the world. The pressure may be quiet, but quiet is not the same as weak. A forest does not need to be destroyed loudly to be changed. It can be changed by repeated browsing. A riverbank does not need an explosion to shift. It can be changed by trampling, erosion, and movement. A plant community does not need a catastrophe to transform. It can be nudged every day by mouths. That is how herbivores become history. Not through one heroic moment. Through repetition. The same principle appears today. Remove large herbivores from some ecosystems, and plants respond. Add them back, and the structure can change again. The exact result depends on species, climate, density, and habitat. But the larger point remains. Big plant eaters are not decorations. They are forces. Now bring that thought back to dinosaurs. The Mesozoic world was not a museum background. It was alive, unstable, and constantly negotiated. Plants were growing. Rivers were shifting. Volcanoes erupted. Seas advanced and retreated. Climate changed. Animals migrated, nested, fed, competed, and died. In that moving world, herbivores were not waiting off screen. They were doing daily work. They were consuming the primary production of the land. They were turning plants into flesh. They were feeding predators indirectly. They were spreading nutrients after digestion. They were opening and closing opportunities for smaller life. Even their deaths mattered. A giant carcass was not only a tragedy, it was a temporary ecosystem. Scavengers fed, insects gathered, microbes worked, bones weathered, nutrients returned. Life reorganized around the fallen body. So even at the end, the herbivore kept feeding the system. That is not a minor role. It is central, but central roles are not always cinematic. The most important character in a city may not be the loudest person. It may be the road system, the water system, the supply chain, the trash collection, the quiet network that lets everything else happen. In dinosaur ecosystems, herbivores may have played that kind of role. Not glamorous, not always terrifying, but foundational. Predators depended on them. Plants responded to them. Landscapes recorded them. Other animals used the spaces they opened. Their bodies moved energy across the world. That makes them harder to market. A poster wants one face, one monster, one open mouth. A herd is more complicated. A landscape is even harder. A feeding system is harder still. But the more complicated story may be closer to the truth. When we say T. rex ruled, what do we mean? Do we mean it was dangerous? Yes. Do we mean it was powerful? Absolutely. Do we mean it was the center of the ecosystem? That is less clear. A predator can sit near the top of a food web. But the top is not the foundation. A roof matters. But it does not hold without walls. And walls do not hold without ground. The herbivores were closer to that ground. They were the living middle between plants and predators. They carried the energy upward. They made the food web possible. So maybe the better question is not who ruled. Maybe the better question is who shaped, who changed the plants, who moved the nutrients, who opened the paths, who made enough living mass for giant predators to exist, who turned sunlight into bodies big enough to shake the earth. When we ask those questions, the answer changes. The story widens. The camera pulls back. The predator is still there. But now it is not alone. Behind it are herds. Behind the herds are forests, floodplains, and feeding grounds. Behind those are plants using light. Behind the plants are climate, soil, and water. The dinosaur world becomes a system again. Not a monster movie. A living machine. And in that machine, herbivores were not side characters. They were engines. Some were armored engines. Some were horned engines. Some were duck-billed engines. Some were long-necked engines taller than buildings. They did not need to roar to matter. They only needed to keep moving. This is also why our imagination needs correction. We often remember danger more easily than maintenance. A single attack becomes a story. 1,000 peaceful meals become background. But background events can build the world. A bite kills quickly. Grazing changes slowly. A chase lasts seconds. A migration can alter regions. A roar disappears into air. Footprints can become stone. The quiet thing is sometimes a larger thing. Not louder, larger. That does not mean every herbivore changed every place equally. Size mattered. Numbers mattered. Behavior mattered. Plant type mattered. Wetlands were different from dry plains. Forests were different from open floodplains. A small ornithopod did not affect a habitat like a massive sauropod. A scattered group did not act like a dense herd. The point is not that all plant eaters were the same. The point is that plant eating itself was a major ecological process, and dinosaur herbivores performed it at scales we can barely picture. This scale changes the emotional meaning of the story. The prey animal stops being helpless scenery. It becomes a builder under pressure. It has to find food, avoid danger, move with others, raise young, choose routes, survive seasons. Its life is not one chase. Its life is a continuous negotiation with land. That is more interesting than the old version. The old version says the carnivore is active and the herbivore reacts. The deeper version says both are active. The predator hunts. The herbivore engineers. One pressures bodies. The other pressures landscapes. And sometimes, the landscape is the bigger story. Imagine a young plant trying to grow under a giant browsing animal. Imagine sunlight reaching the ground after branches disappear. Imagine seeds passing through a dinosaur gut and landing somewhere new. Imagine a muddy river edge stamped by repeated crossings. Imagine smaller animals using trails they never made. Imagine predators learning where herds prefer to move. Imagine plants evolving defenses, textures, height, and growth habits under constant feeding pressure. Not as a simple one-to-one battle, as a long conversation between life forms. That conversation may have shaped entire regions. It may have affected what grew, where animals traveled, where predators waited, where nests were safer, where open spaces appeared, where dense cover returned. This is the kind of story that hides behind the famous teeth. The teeth are real. The teeth matter. But they are not the whole world. A tooth is an ending for one animal. A herd is a process for an ecosystem. That difference matters. If we only follow the tooth, we see death. If we follow the herd, we see the world being made. Maybe that is the better dinosaur story. Not less exciting. Just bigger. Because the most powerful creature is not always the one that scares us. Sometimes it is the one so common that everyone stops noticing it. The one crossing the plain. The one chewing in the background. The one leaving tracks. The one feeding the predator by existing. The one shaping plants without looking dramatic. The one changing tomorrow's forest with today's meal. So the next time a T-Rex appears on screen, keep watching the edges. Look behind the monster. Look at what it depends on. Look at the animals moving in groups. Look at the broken branches. Look at the trails. Look at the trampled mud. Look at the plants trying to grow back. That may be where the main story is hiding. Not in the roar, not in the bite, not even in the chase, but in the slow, heavy movement of herbivores across a living planet. Maybe dinosaur history was not written only by jaws. Maybe it was written by herds. Quietly, repeatedly, step by massive step.